Well, earlier, President Erdogan gave something of an early victory speech. Here he is speaking.
God permitting, I will prove myself to be worthy of the faith that you have showed to me today. As I have done for the past 22 years, I will continue to do so. I told you recently that it wouldn't be just until Sunday, that I would be here until I'm in the grave. We said bye-bye Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, and we aren't going to stop on our path. Just halfway there, we are going to see this through to the end.
Well, look, let's get some more on the ground for you in Turkey. We can cross live to Willam Hilderbrandt. He's standing by in Istanbul for us. Will, we've been listening in together, in fact, to a speech by President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. We know that with you, you have Barçın Yinanç, a journalist with T24. Interesting to hear what Barçın makes of President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's speech today.
Yeah, it is. I've been speaking to her off-air. Barçın, hello, and thank you for joining us here. Your major takeaways from this election. In the run-up, the polls had Erdogan losing in the first round. Was that because the polls got it wrong, or did Erdogan do some sort of master campaigning?
Well, I think it's both. On the one hand, I think the pollsters didn't really realize that the economic hardships hasn't taken the toll that they were thinking, because when they looked at the economic situation, they thought that Erdogan supporters could have been affected by that. But our understanding is that in terms of economic hardships, especially the supporters of Erdogan has not felt them, because Mr. Erdogan has injected tremendous amount of money in the course of these few months, because thanks to the Gulf money, thanks to the fact that Russian president has delayed the natural gas payment, and so at the end of the day, in the course of these 2 weeks as well, he has also continued on spreading the fear that if the opposition comes, it will be chaos, because the parliament is already dominated by the ruling coalition. Therefore, I would say too has factored in different amounts.
Yeah, but after that first round, we saw both sides doing a bit of fear-mongering, the opposition also guilty of that, and maybe even for perhaps abandoning its sort of unity, inclusive message. We saw the heart emojis. We saw a very warm, friendly opposition before round one. After round two, they got some criticism for that. Was that a misstep by the CHP and the Table of Six?
I'm not sure. I wouldn't personally like to hear this U-turn, this ultra-nationalistic rhetoric. Having said that, Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu appears to have, increased its votes a little bit thanks to that rhetoric.
Does that mean the nationalists have replaced the Kurds as the kingmakers in Turkey?
That could have well been the case, because we have also seen a bit of a drop in the Kurdish votes, precisely because of this nationalist tone. We think that according to early results, there has been some drops on the Kurdish votes, and basically the opposition realized that the fear factor, which was used by the ruling coalition, has played and has overruled all the economic problems. Therefore, they have resorted themselves to these issues as well.
Yeah, and what we saw was we did a lot of speaking and analyzing about the economy, about the earthquake, about reconstruction, about inflation and unorthodox policies. But in the end, it does seem like it was maybe identity and cultural politics and one side that can't see past the other side.
Correct. We are seeing that polarization in Turkey is taking deep roots, has taken deep roots. Mr. Erdogan designed Turkey's political landscape in a way to have two coalitions, where supporters of these coalitions, even though they might not be very happy with their own parties, they just cannot cross across the other side, because one is not the alternative of the other. So what they do, they pass to the other smaller parties. And we have to also admit that especially the conservatives on Mr. Erdogan's side, they just cannot overcome the fear that the other side has secular ideology, and they still fear that if the secular camp comes, they can be discriminated against. Therefore, the polarization did factor in. But another thing that factored in as well is that the ruling coalition has used massively the state means. We are now seeing a state party or party state running Turkey, and there has been also tremendous oppression, especially against supporters of the opposition, which makes me wonder whether the elections in Turkey were free, perhaps, but to what degree they were fair, because when we speak about democracy, it's not just about the election day, but it's also the process that leads us towards the election day, and this was not a fair competition.
Can you elaborate on that?
Well, one example, for instance, I mean, in the past, Interior Minister, Justice Minister, Transportation Ministers used to resign, and neutral names would have gone. Now we have an Interior Minister who is massively campaigning, and all the security officers are under his authority, and we have heard irregularities and a lot of pressure on the opposition, especially in rural areas in Turkey. Another example, the Interior Minister could send me an SMS, but I couldn't get an SMS from the opposition leader Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu because he was banned from sending SMS. The High Electoral Board, most of the decisions that it has taken was in favor of the ruling coalition. They said that there's no problem for the ministers to campaign because they are not public officials. Well, ministers are public officials, and I can go on and go on in terms of the media landscape. The whole media, mainstream media, is under government control. The opposition is trying to use the social media. There as well, we have lots of pressure.
This is a common refrain, a free election but not a fair election. I'm wondering what the opposition does now. Is there soul searching? Should they be happy about how far they've come, or is it a time of reflection and maybe question about the leadership?
That's the big problem with the Turkish opposition. So we have to also talk about the weaknesses of the Turkish opposition, because there has been a lot of controversy over whether Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu was the right candidate, having lost so many times.
But their hands were kind of tied behind their back in this case.
Correct. But many would say that had the mayor of Istanbul ran, things could have turned out differently. There is also another factor that Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu forged a coalition with smaller conservative parties. While these conservative parties have entered the parliament with huge numbers of parliamentarians, it is a big question mark to what degree they have campaigned in favor of the ruling coalition. So to come back to your earlier question, that's the biggest problem with the opposition. After there is a loss, there isn't a genuine soul searching, I mean, there is no resignation, there is no rejuvenation of the party. Would we see it this time? I am not sure.
But this was the first ever presidential runoff. Recep Tayyip Erdogan remains undefeated in national elections. But the question is now, is his power consolidated? Will he become stronger, or do you think he'll be more compromising with this third term as president?
Honestly, I don't expect him to be compromising, because when you look at the election result, after all the use of state means, after all the use of oppressive methods, at the end of the day, I mean, the difference is 4%. So I think he would feel the breath of the opposition in his neck. And let's not forget that in these elections we have seen mobilization of the civil society, especially in terms of the supporters of the opposition. They went to the ballot box in order to check their votes, to safeguard their votes. So he is aware of this social mobilization in the camps of the opposition. Therefore, I would think that he is going to continue with his oppressive methods. He has always promised to be more conciliatory, but he has never done so.
And when we speak about oppressive methods, what do you think happened with the Syrian refugees in the country? That became a talking point after round one, the anti-migrant rhetoric from the ruling party and the opposition. What will be Erdogan's first point of business on this issue?
Well, he had already started to campaign saying that a lot of construction is being done in Syria in order to send back the Syrian refugees.
In the Turkish-controlled part of northern Syria.
Exactly. And so he is just going to continue underlining this. Second, he most probably, Turkey, under his administration, had already started to seek dialogue with Bashar al-Assad, the leader of Syria. Therefore, the search for dialogue with Mr. Assad will continue. It wouldn't be, it's very surprising to see the two leaders come, not maybe in the short term, because I'm not expecting Mr. Assad to make things very easy for Mr. Erdogan, who tried to topple him. So we will see two steps. On the one hand, trying to finish the construction, try to encourage Syrians to go back with incentives, and trying to seek some kind of a dialogue with Bashar al-Assad. At the same time, bringing in Russia and Iran, because we already had these quadrilateral talks between Turkey, Russia, Iran, and Syria, which had started already.
Another issue, southeastern Turkey, the Kurdish community. What's in store? It felt like the Kurds were sort of left out of round two as everyone pushed for the nationalists. The Kurds were left finding themselves without a backer.
Well, indeed, I think they will also go to some kind of a soul searching because unfortunately the current Turkish parliament has really moved towards a very nationalistic, far-right side, and so they will have to have an uphill battle in terms of coming up with their positions.
It's a big day in Turkey. It's a momentous election. It's a 10-year anniversary since the Gezi Park massacre as well. Turkey at a crossroads. It could have gone towards a more democratic, pro-Western opposition. Instead, it looks like Erdogan will be in power for at least 5 years. We don't know what he has in store. What do you think is down the road in terms of social changes in this country and where it's headed?
Well, actually, we are seeing some kind of changes. We are being told by experts and political scientists that actually there is an appetite of change in terms of the supporters of Mr. Erdogan. Especially the more Turkey will turn into a urban centers, the more there will be young conservative people coming out. I think they will also would not like to live in this oppressive atmosphere. So this time maybe they had fell victim to their fears of chaos, of fears that maybe the other side could deprive them of their privileges. But especially the more Turkish society will become younger, the more Mr. Erdogan, I have the feeling, will have difficulty to attract votes from conservative, especially young segments.
Barçın, thank you very much for your time. Barçın Yinanç, a journalist from T24. That's what you have there, Rochelle. Some soul searching for the opposition as Erdogan looks to move on towards a third term as president.
All right, Will and Barçın in Istanbul for us. Thanks very much.